Hey, what's up, everyone? Today's a really exciting day because today we get to talk about something that I really, really love, and that is America. And why do I love America so much? It's diversity. The people are diverse, each state is diverse, economies are diverse. It's such a massive territory with over 300 million people living in it. So, as a result, because it's so diverse, it actually makes it a little bit hard to talk about and discuss because you're kind of comparing apples and oranges, so to speak. But this does help because we have something to help us talk about such a vast, diverse place, and that is one of our 5 themes of geography, and that is regions. Now, if you remember from previous lectures, when we talk about regions, we're grouping similar places. Let me say that again. We're grouping similar places. A place is something unique in a geography class. It's a very specific term. We could be talking about various locations pointing to things, places on a map, but place is the thing that makes a location unique. Remember that. So let's dive in. Let's talk about the United States and talk about our regions, maybe a regional perspective of the U.S. The regions of the U.S. Now, of course, you could just divide it up according to location. This is a pretty straightforward view of the U.S. We talk about these locations all the time. You've got the West, the Northwest, the Midwest, the Mid-Atlantic states, etc. It's pretty easy to divide it that way. Again, another pretty similar but maybe a little bit more detailed view, the Pacific, the Rocky Mountains, the Midwest, etc. But there's actually more ways to talk about the U.S. and the regions other than just maybe based off of location and the series of states that it's grouped with. For instance, you have the Sun Belt. This is the southernmost stretch of the U.S. It is aptly called the Sun Belt because it stays pretty warm all year. Great example of the Sun Belt are the snowbirds. And no, we're not talking about birds. We're talking about people. Typically elderly folks, retired folks that live up in the northern stretches of the United States. Well, it gets quite cold up there, and old people and cold, usually not a very good mix, not ideal. So you see an annual migration into the Sun Belt. That's why you have a lot of retirement communities in Arizona and Florida. Folks fly south for the winter. They enjoy a nice warm winter in Arizona or Florida. And then once it turns around and gets too hot during the summertime, they move back to their homes up in the north. So this region is grouped based off of economics. This is what we call the Rust Belt. There's both a lot of really, at least formally, a lot of really heavy manufacturing. When you talk about cars and steel, the Pittsburgh Steelers has nothing to do with theft. But then there needs to be raw materials to support that heavy industry. So you see a lot of coal mining, etc. in this area as well. So a lot of iron production, a lot of steel production, cars, things like that. The heavy industry, aptly called then the Rust Belt. Now let's keep in mind that when we talk about regions, some of these are what we call vernacular regions. And by vernacular, we mean there's no necessarily quantifiable data that says that this region is indeed a region, but it's more based off of our perceptions. So a good example of a vernacular region here in the U.S. is the Bible Belt. Again, this is oftentimes just generally called the South, but there's a stronghold of evangelical and Southern Baptists in this region. So that's why you typically find this region to be a little bit more socially conservative and a little bit more religious based in their culture. Now I want to warn you about this next slide. Remember that geographers do not stereotype. Nothing in a geography class is meant for stereotype or for harm. What we want to do are find generalizations and characteristics. So with that, just remember that this isn't a negative thing. This is only meant for the purposes of geography. And that's the black belt. It is. Now, there's no denying that the U.S. is still currently grappling with its legacy of slavery here in the United States. Slaves were imported from Africa from 1619 through 1807. And the slave trade wasn't finally abolished until 1865. Once that occurred, you saw a migration of African Americans, or the black community, out of the South. This occurred especially after World War I and into World War II. However, in recent years, there's actually been a net in-migration of African Americans into the South. Due to the legacy of slavery and also the net in-migration of African Americans within the last couple decades, this region does see a higher population of African Americans than perhaps some of the other regions or all of the other regions in the United States. Now, it's not just politics or economics that can set regions apart from each other, but agriculture as well. So if you take a look at the map, you can see that various types of crops are dominant in certain regions. This right here, this whole region right here, we typically just refer to as the breadbasket, but you can see we've got corn, we've got various wheats and barleys and grains all throughout here, a lot of soy as well. You get a lot of dairy farming up in the north. This western region sees a considerable amount of cattle ranching, and of course we can't forget good old California. Our Mediterranean climate actually makes us the perfect place for agriculture. We can grow crops year long, and we are the #1 agricultural producer in the entire United States. What about airline/nodal regions? You can actually, these are called functional regions, and it's all based off of which airports you fly when you're flying across the United States, which airports you're going to stop at along the way. But I think I'm getting a little carried away now with all these regions. I'm actually going to turn it over to an article that you guys are going to read called The 9 Nations of North America. Now, this is an old one. It goes all the way back to 1981, which actually is older than me even. Hard to believe, I know. But I want you to go ahead and read through that article and get a better idea of these different regions and what sets them apart from each other. So enjoy. Thanks for watching. Namaste.